not an introduction, it's a key. But key to what? Oh, it must be key to unlocking the rest of the Quran. But hang on a second, like the whole Quran is 114 chapters. Okay, so if we split it into two parts, a key and a message, we find the message is 113 chapters. 113 is also a prime number. Interesting. What about the verses? Yeah, what about the verses? Glory to Him. The verses are following the same pattern. Also, we have 6,236 verses in total. 7 of them we said for this chapter, the key, and 6229 for the rest of the Quran, which is again a prime number. But in cryptology we use long prime numbers. God here using very small numbers. Why would He just use this one? What I realized later, that these are not any prime numbers. They are very special prime numbers in the fact that the digits of each one of them, the sum of the digits, is also a prime. So if you take the number, for example, 29 words, so 2 plus 9 is 11, also prime. The same with all the other prime numbers, the 139, the 113, the 629, and so on.
I see.
All of them prime numbers, and their digit sum also prime. And these numbers they call additive prime numbers. Okay, so God is using these ones, special type of prime numbers, which are like double rare or more rare or rarer than prime numbers themselves. Prime numbers are rare as you go up. They never end. Okay, there's an infinite number of them.
I see.
Yeah, but prime numbers that are additive prime numbers, they are half the other numbers, or half of the prime numbers. Okay, so they are rarer. But all this, still I was a bit skeptic on friends and families. They say this could be a coincidence. But when I found that joining these numbers, putting them next to each other, concatenation, the 7 verses, 29 words, 139 letters, left to right or right to left, also produced a prime number. So it's 729139 or 139297. Both of them are prime numbers, which means they are mothers of their multiples. Not odd, they are multiples, they are new mothers. Okay, and the sum of the digits, each one of them is a 31, which is also prime. So they are additive prime numbers. Once I found this one, I knew that God is telling us that this chapter is to be treated as a key, not just introduction.
I see.
And also there is a verse actually confirming this division, which says, we have given you the 7 most repeated verses and the Grand Quran. And the Prophet, peace be upon him and his family, when asked what are these 7 most repeated verses, and he said these are the key verses. Okay, Surah Al-Fatiha.
And this is maybe a point where I think it would be good to make mention of the idea that I think oftentimes folks who have been on one spiritual path maybe for their entire life, oftentimes people, the spiritual path that they select for themselves is that they were raised into a family. For example, if a person is born into a family of Protestants, maybe they're Lutherans or maybe they're Baptists, they oftentimes follow that same spiritual path their entire life. And sometimes I think it leads to some misinformation or a lack of understanding of some of the other paths and what are really tremendous similarities between the paths as opposed to differences. I've found in my own research and in my life, for example, that Islam and Christianity, they're so very, very, very much more closely related than what there are differences between the practices and beliefs of these paths. Would you find that to be fair to say?
Of course, of course. And even I would add that whatever might happen next year, and I hope it happens, will actually unite all people around the earth, regardless of religion. Okay?
Yes.
As I will explain in a moment. Okay.
And I think that the reason I made mention of this is because at this point, I want anyone who they maybe have been Christians their lifetime, or maybe it's some other path, but the Quran itself. Some folks may not be aware of its origin, and I hope that you would add more fully. I'll just try to state very quickly that it was received by the Prophet Muhammad from the Archangel Gabriel, that many Christians are familiar with from their own spiritual path. And so what I find that's interesting about the analogy that you made earlier to the movie Contact, in that movie it was a message that was received from the heavens, and it was encoded with prime numbers. And to be fully understood here on Earth by us, by humans, we had to crack that code of prime numbers to understand the message received from the heavens. And I find it to be a truly fascinating analogy, more so than an analogy, a direct linkage toward this experience that you're talking about with the message in the Quran.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I'm thankful for you to have read this actually, because what we say in Islam, that the Quran was revealed in one go from the seventh heaven to the third heaven, and then the arch rival Angel Jibreel, revealed by the order of God the message over 23 years, lunar years, okay, or Islamic years, to the Prophet, peace be upon him. And the way it was revealed is not the same in the same order as we have it now. So the order is as if it's shuffled by God to keep the code intact. But the revelation, where whenever there is some occasion, it will be revealed for that occasion, part of it, and so on. And the revelations, interesting things about it, sometimes you get a whole chapter revealed in one go, and sometimes you get a verse that is revealed in two even different cities, like Mecca and Medina, the same verse. But when you look at the Quran, you see, why these ones have been put together, okay? And if we look at the Quran, God says, I revealed the Quran to you in an Arabic tongue. Now the Quran is very precise when it talks, okay, God when talking the Quran. So he would never use an extra word for nothing, unless it means something. So why wouldn't he say just we revealed the Quran in Arabic? Okay, he would say in an Arabic tongue. Okay, and what I found, and even the name, the Quran, actually the name Quran means the readable, that readability of the Quran is Arabic, but the text itself is deviate from the Arabic deliberately. Sometimes you have extra letters, sometimes you have missing letters, sometimes you have exchange letters, sometimes you have the split between the words, and not the way we would write it in Arabic. Okay,
I see.
And we have, for example, there are 114 chapters. 29 of these chapters, when they start, the first verse of them is just single letters, like a few letters, Alif, Lam, Mim, A-L-M, for example, which nobody in the whole world knows what they mean. Okay, so these are like local keys to the chapter.
I see.
Yeah. So the revelation was over 23 years, yes, but it was revealed in one night, in the Ramadan night. That's what the Quran says itself. And that revelation came to the third heaven. Now, this Quran, God guarantees its authenticity throughout time. And nobody, not Muhammad, not any human, not any even being from outer space could guarantee that. Okay? Because they all die. They cannot guarantee something after they die. So the Quran, as it is now, we have it exactly as it was before. But the only differences are adding extra diacritics, for example, on top to keep it readable for us, because the Arabs then, when they look at the word, just like in English, when you read the word, when you look at some, for example, SMS even messages, you say L-E-R, L-8, Lam, L8, later, for example, when you write, okay, these short words, okay? Okay. So these short words, we get used to them so much. The Arabs used to the Quran without even dots. Then they realized for the non-Arab people they had to add dots to them, but they knew there are dots here, but they never wrote them. They wrote dots. Then they wrote diacritics. But throughout time, it never changes. The text is exactly the same text, and God guaranteeing the preservance of it. And this is why there is a verse in the Quran itself. It says, whatever verse or sign, some people say it's a sign, not verse, we reveal to you, we could edit or cause it to be forgotten. Okay, cause it to be forgotten.
Okay.
So we bring a similar or a better one. And normally God would say, God is capable of doing anything. Here it says, don't you know that God is capable of doing everything? So God is capable of updating the Quran in real time, okay, to suit different times without us, all of us knowing. It will be updated in all hard copies, in CDs, in computers, in our minds, in all the interpretations of it. And we would not be able to, because that's what God says. God says, don't you know that God is capable of doing anything? Is a strong emphasis there.
I see.
Yeah. So when we find that the Quran at this time, when human beings are advanced in computer science and cryptology using prime numbers, revealing to us or showing us prime numbers are the key to unlocking some of its secrets, okay, we cannot ignore it. We should all unite together and find it. And the unification factor will be next year's events, okay, 2012 events.
Very definitely. And I apologize to interrupt, but we have only just a few more minutes here briefly. Before I have our other guest, and again I apologize, but due to his scheduling, we'll need to bring him in. Could we spend this last roughly 4 minutes here? Could you set the stage, an overview of the events, your findings, what you believe that the Quran instructs us as to what to expect, and the window of time coming up, and then when we come back in the third hour, we'll again speak more toward the methodology of your approach to discover these findings.
Okay, indeed, yes. So what I found from the Quran, that there is a chapter which has a often repeated verse, a lot of the verse repeated so many times that it was begging to be counted how many times it's repeated, and it was repeated a prime number of times. And when you add the number of the verse numbers that the verse repeats at, okay, these numbers of the same verse, also gives you an additive prime number. And when you see that this additive prime number is referring to 2012, but not specific actually to the Islamic year 1433, which is next year, current Islamic year is 1432, then it overlaps 2012. And specifically, this is a number, we cannot guarantee it's a year, but God gave us a hint, a strong hint, that this is a year by making the number of words in this chapter, the chapter that contains these verses, equals exactly the number of a Hijri year, of an Islamic year, and not any Islamic year, it has to be a leap year. When you go to next year, 1433 after Hijrah, after migration of the Prophet, you find it has exactly the same numbers because it's a leap year. And this is where we get all the events, which would be each event, we don't know exactly what they could be, but most likely meteorites show us over 31 latitudes all around the earth. And because the latitude is wide, I believe and hope that it will miss deliberately, God will miss all religious places, regardless of religion, to show that we all worship the same one God. And because the Quran is telling us where the next event is, then we should pay more attention to it and start respecting Islam, basically.
Very interesting, very interesting. And now, just a kind of a brief overview of it is a set of events. I think that you identify as being about 4 days in length. Yes. Could you talk to us a little bit again about Elenin, your thoughts, a projection about what you see as this connection? Sorry,
I didn't talk details. I thought I didn't have time. Certainly. What I found first, there are 31 repetitions of the same verse, very dense repetitions, every second verse almost, okay? And these verses, each one of them is 4 words, and the whole chapter has exactly the same number of days, words as days in the year. And the sum of these 31 verse numbers points to next year, 1433 in Islamic, I think, which actually starts in November this year and ends November next year. So each word maps to a day. 355 words maps to 355 days in a leap Islamic year, a lunar year. And that means there would be 31 events. Each event would last 4 days because the verse has 4 words in it.
Yes.
And the gaps between the events the same as the number of words between this repeated verse.
Yes. And your feeling is that these events, the first window being the 7th through the 10th of January of 2012, what will be occurring in those windows, in those events?
Whatever it is occurring, it must be coming from outer space, because when I assume that something going to come from outer space, say meteorite shower, or even going through the tail of this comet Elenin, okay, and the tail could be made of lots of different density areas, and we go through them as if they were stripes, for example. So each stripe we go through it is like for 4 days. The most important thing